Elder and child abuse. Tragic, horrifying, unthinkable. Yet it's estimated hundreds of thousands of elders and children are abused each year. Estimated because our picture of elder and child abuse is limited due to the hidden and complex nature of the problem and the failure of healthcare workers and others to report elder and child abuse consistently. More disturbingly, with elder abuse, the number of victims is expected to rise as the population ages. It can be hard to spot the more subtle forms of neglect and abuse. They are often unrecognized because victims tend to be isolated. In fact, you may be one of the only objective observers who see the elders over time, so you may be one of the only ones who can break the cycle of abuse and neglect. How? By learning to recognize elder or child abuse and neglect, by learning how to respond to the cases, and by committing yourself to safeguarding clients in your care. Child or elder abuse is defined as any act or failure to act by a guardian or caregiver that results in actual or potential harm to the child or elder. It includes all forms of mistreatment of a child or elderly person that may include physical, sexual, psychological, or financial abuse or neglect. It may or may not be intentional, and a child or older adult will often suffer several forms of abuse and neglect at the same time. Physical abuse is an act that results in bodily harm, injury, impairment, or disease. It usually takes the form of hitting, slapping, pushing, punching, pinching, burning, striking, or striking with objects. It may also include sexual coercion or assault. Incorrect positioning of a child or elder. Force feeding. Improper use of physical restraints. Physical abuse is the most obvious form of abuse because it often leaves behind telltale physical signs. Some forms of physical abuse are hard to spot. Did you know it's physically abusive to rush an elder, pulling him or her too fast when walking with them? Well, it is. It's also physical abuse to tie a wandering patient or resident to a chair because you don't want her to get lost while you're busy. Giving a patient too much or too little medication can be physical abuse as well. It is never acceptable to use chemical or physical restraint for discipline or convenience. There's no excuse for physical abuse. Psychological abuse inflicts emotional pain or distress on its victims. It comprises verbal scolding, harassment or intimidation, threatening punishment or deprivation, treating an elder like a child or infant, or isolating the child or elder from family, friends, or activities. It often goes hand in hand with physical abuse. When it doesn't, it's harder to spot unless you witness it. Generally, the victim's demeanor and behavior offer clues. Depression, fear, hopelessness, withdrawal, or isolation can signal psychological abuse. You may not recognize some of the more subtle forms of psychological abuse, such as taking something away from a patient or resident when you're angry, scolding someone in front of others when she's done something embarrassing like soiled her pants or isolating someone. These acts create an environment where the person may feel shame, insecurity, or a lack of control and can be psychologically damaging. There's no excuse for psychological abuse. Financial abuse occurs when people take control of the child or elder's resources through misrepresentation, coercion, or outright theft for their own gain. Financial abuse may include stealing money or possessions, forcing the elder to sign contracts or assign durable powers of attorney to someone, or charging the older adult for unnecessary services or services never rendered. Financial abuse can be difficult to identify because often there are no obvious indicators and the victim may be unaware it's happening. There is no excuse for financial abuse. While abuse describes actions, neglect refers to omissions. Neglect occurs when a child or older adult suffers from a lack of attention to his or her person or environment. At its worst, the victim's physical and mental health can be at risk because their basic needs are being neglected. Physical neglect involves failure to provide goods and services necessary for the health and well-being of the child or elder. Physical neglect may include withholding adequate meals or hydration, physical therapy or hygiene, as well as failure to provide physical aids such as hearing aids, glasses, and false teeth, or failure to provide safety precautions such as nightlights or safety bars. What if you remove someone's cane or walker from the side of the bed? This is neglect. It keeps a person from getting around. It's also physical neglect if you mark the chart that the person was repositioned in bed, as ordered in the plan of care, then fail to do so. Physical neglect is abuse. Psychological neglect is failure to provide social stimulation. That may mean leaving the child or older person alone for long periods of time, ignoring them or giving them the silent treatment, or failing to provide companionship, changes in routine, or links to the outside world. Psychological neglect is abuse. So, which children or elders are at greatest risk of abuse? Research indicates children and older adults from all walks of life can be victims. Boys, girls, men and women from all racial, ethnic, and economic groups. Remember, any child or elder may fall victim to abuse. They're frequently dependent on their abusers and are reluctant, even too embarrassed, to complain. Also, victims may have mixed feelings about their abusers. Those conflicting feelings make it difficult for them to consider removing themselves from the abuser's grasp, or being a child, they may be unable to. So, who are the abusers? They're family members, caregivers, strangers, men and women, essentially anyone. Bottom line, you need to watch the activities of all people with access to children and elders in your care. Several risk factors have been identified as contributors to abuse and neglect. Of special importance is the caregiver's pattern of dealing with stress. Caregivers with an abusive history may continue that behavior at work. Some caregivers, particularly those with little or no formal training or support, can be overwhelmed by the strain of caring for a dependent elder or child. Even more stressful, some children or seniors can be abusive to their caregivers. They may have Alzheimer's disease or another mental disorder and so lack self-control. It's important to step away from the patient or resident if you feel angry or extremely frustrated. Return only when you've calmed down. Many times the possible victim can't or won't help you uncover the truth. So, what can you do? You need to be aware of the common warning signs of abuse and neglect and be on the lookout for them. There's cause for suspicion when injuries as described are inconsistent with medical findings, or if the child or elder and caregiver give contradictory accounts. Physical evidence may include bruises, welts, lacerations, fractures, burns, rope or restraint marks. Notice if the injuries are in various stages of healing, because this can indicate ongoing abuse. Genital injuries may be symptomatic of sexual abuse. If possible, someone should review laboratory results, which may reveal over or under medicating or unexplained venereal disease. Telltale signs of neglect are dehydration, malnutrition, decubitus ulcers, poor personal hygiene, lack of compliance with medical regimens. Psychological abuse or neglect is signaled by extreme withdrawal, depression, or agitation, infantile behavior in elders, and indifference toward others. Financial abuse or neglect should be considered if the client appears to be receiving an inadequate level of care, despite adequate financial resources, if the elder seems vague about his or her finances or has suddenly transferred assets or control of them to someone else. Anytime you suspect abuse or neglect, you must take action. It's your ethical and legal responsibility. You must follow your facility's assessment and reporting policies, which are designed to protect children and elders. When necessary, the proper authorities will conduct a complete investigation. Here are some general guidelines. You need to intervene immediately when you see abuse or neglect, even when you just suspect it. Your primary concern is to protect the victim. Take immediate steps to ensure the child or elder's safety and contact your supervisor or the care center to report concerns. It's critical the incident is recorded accurately. The sooner it's documented, the more reliable the information. You may be the mistreated child or elder's only chance for help. Remember, child or elder abuse or neglect is a common problem, a problem you're likely to encounter. Be alert for signs of abuse or neglect. Document what you come across and report any suspicions. Do your part to bring this hidden problem into the open. Show your concern. Become an advocate for the patients in your care. Child and elder abuse. There's no excuse.